Meet Karthik Iyengar, an Indian who lived in Berlin for 8 years despite never having left India before the move. A software engineer by trade, now he runs his own consulting business. Karthik shares what made him leave at 26, how he feels about India now, and the biggest benefit of living in Berlin. I'm Nick Ang, your guide to expat life in Europe. Let's go.
My name is Karthik Iyengar, and I'm originally from Mumbai, India, and I moved to Berlin around 8 years ago. I'm a software engineer by trade. After doing engineering for various companies, I decided to start my own company here in Germany around 2 years ago. And now my company does software for banks and fintechs, and we also build products of our own.
What is the name of your company?
It's called We Build Products.
Before you moved to Berlin, where else have you lived before?
Berlin was the first city that I moved to outside of India. It was quite the move in the sense that I kind of transcended a complete continent without context and without knowing anyone in the city. There was this piece of my brain which was contemplating whether this company actually exists in real life, or am I just coming to a random country just trying to figure shit out on my own,
Are you saying that this is the first country you went to completely? Like you never went to other countries before you moved out?
No, yes. This was the first country I moved to. Of course, after I came to Europe, I started traveling around a lot more because there's a lot more to see and do. And
just so the audience knows you a little bit, in 3 words, can you try to describe yourself?
So I'm definitely curious. I'm compassionate. And it would be funny if I say humble. It's like saying I'm humble, I think I'm passionate about a lot of things. I have a lot of life in me. So, I like to do things and I like to create things.
Can you tell us about the story behind your move?
So, I spent most of my life in India. So, I was in Bombay for around 25 years, Mumbai. I wish I had like a great background story, like I'm David Bowie's like lost child from India or something, but I really don't have a good reason why I'm in Berlin. I was trying to go out of my comfort zone. This has been a recurring theme for me in my life, right? Like when I was in India, I thought that my life had gotten to a point where it got very repetitive. That being said, I was 25 and I was getting a bit fed up of living with my parents. Sorry, mom and dad, if you're listening, but yeah, that is the truth. So I decided to try other avenues. I applied to many countries. I didn't have just Germany in mind, but I definitely wanted to be somewhere in Europe. And then I happened to find a company that I really liked. It felt like a really good fit for me and my career at that point. And I decided to apply to it, and it all happened within a span of 3 months. It was quicker than I imagined, and all of a sudden in 3 months I was in a different continent, That was 8 years ago, 2017.
Yeah. How old were you when that happened?
26.
26, yeah. So how many years of experience have you had by that time?
In software engineering, I was building software since 2013. So that would give me around 5 years of experience when I decided to move out. 5 years of real world experience, so to speak.
And was your background in university also in computer science or something related?
Yes, I did my bachelor's in information technology and I did my master's in computer applications.
Oh, so you finished your master's already by then?
Yes, I did not come here to study. I came here to work.
What risks do you think you had to take to make this move possible?
We also had this conversation today about how the best things in life come to you when you take risks. And I feel like there were many moments in life where I thought I was being super passive, and every time I sensed that, I tried to take more risks and I tried to put myself in a spot where I can push myself to doing something that would give me more joy. And I think the move outside of home was definitely something like that. In terms of risks, like I said, I wasn't very well traveled. I never really had a lot of exposure to culture outside my own country except from pop culture. Moving to Germany in itself was quite a big risk for me, given the fact that I did not know anyone here. Also, I had no idea how my career would pan out. Also, I hadn't lived without my parents for ever, So I've never really been in a situation where I did not have any support system, so to speak. I think it's also it's really hard sometimes to admit that you're vulnerable and you don't know, and embrace the fact that you don't know when you're in such an environment. And also that puts you emotionally at risk, because at a certain point you have to accept that this situation might or might not work out, and you need to have the stomach and the gumption to see it through. And I feel like I had to go through a big journey in trying to find that within me.
If you try to psychoanalyze yourself, would you say you were trying to leave something behind or chase something new?
I was definitely trying to leave a lot behind. I was trying to leave the baggage of how it feels like to be in the context of an Indian society behind. And I was trying to move towards something that gave me a bit more of freedom and a bit less of judgment and control, because it would then allow me to explore who I am in peace. And I felt like when I was in India, especially when I was living with my parents, I did not have the room to do that, mainly because life in India is very community driven, in the sense that there are a lot of societal expectations from you. There are also things that people are supposed to do and not supposed to do, and at many times devolves into judgment and conformity. And I really like to be in places where I don't really have to conform to what is the standard thing to do, but rather I would like to be guided by my own intuition and my own identity. And I felt like I wasn't able to do that a lot in India. So, to a large extent, I was trying to run away from it or run towards something else. Like, sometimes when you have the urge to move, it is also super important to ask, what are you moving for? Are you moving to move away from your problems? Or are you moving from a sense of wanting to be there? And it's really important to ask that question, because having spoken to many of my friends, they do want to move, but they want to move because they're trying to run away from some of their problems. And they feel like just being somewhere else might get rid of those problems. And it might very well be true in many cases. It might give you a new start, a new opportunity, a new way to begin. But this has to be accompanied by a lot of contemplation in resolving the deeper problem within you before you decide to take a move. At least you need to be aware of why you're moving. And sometimes it might not be that obvious. Sometimes you might need some help. Like, for example, you asking me that question triggered these thoughts within me, and I was able to go back to that point. Similarly, if you're in a place where you're trying to move, it might help for you to talk to someone to reflect about how you truly feel about leaving your country or leaving where you are currently. It could be as simple as like wanting to start a new life, wanting a better job, or like wanting to make more money. But is there anything else apart from those things that is also causing you to move? Maybe it is some stress that you're facing in your personal life, or it's maybe something that's unaddressed about your past that you're trying to escape from, and so on. Because once you move to a new country, you will have to face that and you will have to like make your peace with those things. You would have to like face them head on at some point. So it helps to know before.
If an old friend that knew you before you moved saw you now, what do you think they would say has changed about you?
Of course, they would say that I'm a bit more calm and composed. Secondly, they would feel like I'm even more rounded in my opinions than I was before, mainly because I've a lot of exposure now to the sort of things that I would never have exposure to in my home country. That mainly revolves around working with people not only from your own country or different parts of your own country, but like people from all across the world. If you feel like the diversity in your country in terms of languages or in terms of culture is large, being in a metropolitan city completely changes the game. So that sort of perspective about how different lives are possible, how you can be accepting of all of those lives, is something that has definitely changed in me. As one would say, it broadens your horizons of how you view others and how you view yourself. And that is definitely something that my friends would notice in me if I start speaking to them. Thirdly, they might say that I've become a lot more fun. Again, right now I have like a lot of hobbies and a lot of things that I do, and a lot of things that I enjoy in life that I did not have the space for when I was back in India. Mainly because life in India for me centered heavily around work and family, and it didn't really allow me a lot of time to explore what I really want to do and what gives me joy apart from these things. I feel like I've had a lot of time to explore that aspect of me, and that has resulted in me becoming a bit more chilled out and fun, I would say.
When I came to your apartment, for the people who are viewing, I'm staying in Karthik's apartment. He's very nice to let me stay in his apartment. He was just jamming with his friend in the morning.
I mean, Berlin is really awesome to do all sorts of things, man. The amount of things that happen here and the amount of things that you have like instant, effortless access to is crazy. Like people from all walks of life doing all sorts of cool things. Berlin has this archetype of being the sort of city that doesn't really care a lot about who you are and so on. But the other side to it is that they do really care if you like talk to them about something that you like doing or something that you could do together. And if you could find that and allow yourself the time to find that in the city, you can have a lot of fun with whatever it has to offer. It is truly an amazing city where people can truly be free if they choose to.
How do you go about discovering people who share the same interests?
There are many aspects to this question. There is so much to unpack with respect to this. When you are in a new city, it's not easy, especially when you come from a different culture. There can be this overbearing sense of loneliness, the overbearing sense of not being able to connect to other people around you. Also, there could be this feeling that you get that any sort of relationships that you make in this city sometimes can be very fleeting and they don't last, because believe it or not, a lot of people do come to Berlin, but a lot of people leave Berlin as well. I've lost a lot of the people that I knew because they wanted to move on to other chapters in their life. And it can be a bit tenuous to find your position, your people, your community, or the things that you like, or people that can be consistent in your life. But there are also so many different ways to do this. First of all, it depends on your interests. So for example, if you're interested in music, there is a huge music scene here, right? Like people who not only play music, who listen to music, who like to go to concerts together, who like to discuss music, who like to essentially do like shared listening sessions together and so on. You can find a lot of these people on meetup.com. You could also like find a lot of these people in Berlin communities. On Reddit, for example, there's a very active community of people. It's called Berlin Social Club, I believe. So that's something that could work. Secondly, you can basically like reach out to Vereins. Vereins are a huge part of life here. Verein is basically, for people who don't know, it's essentially like a club, but it has official standing in Germany. So you can essentially create a club and you can invite other people to join you for any of these activities. For instance, you can be a part of a Verein that plays sports. So you have to pay like a monthly membership, and once you pay that membership, you are then slotted in to play. You can do a lot of volunteering here. The German population does like doing like volunteering work, for example. So maybe you can like join your local homeless shelter or something, and you can essentially like spend some time connecting with people there. A lot of people like reading in the city, and there are many places where you can just go and read and discuss books with people, for example.
You just came from one, right?
I just came from one this morning, which was really great, and I met like some really cool people. And soon you'll realize that like after a point of like doing these things, you essentially like start bumping into the same people in different venues, and sometimes relationships can start that way.
Is language a barrier when you come to these meetups?
Language is mostly not a barrier.
You speak English when you go for these events most of the time?
Most of the times I do speak in English. The younger generation here does speak a lot of English. The older generation also speaks English, but you might find some barriers there. But in general, Berlin is fairly metropolitan and it's fairly conducive to English speaking. That being said, it really also helps to learn German, because it gives you a whole different perspective of viewing things. It opens up an entirely different avenue of understanding the people who live here and understanding your role in society here and understanding like cultural nuances. Germans also find it easier to open up when people are speaking in German.
What's something that you didn't even think about before you moved, but has now become something that matters a lot to you?
I think back when I was in India, I wasn't very inclined towards religion and spirituality or any sort of internal contemplation. Like for me, spirituality is like your connection with the other, like you and the other, and what is your connection to the outside world. I mean, those are the sort of topics that became a bit more important to me when I was in Berlin and I was spending time thinking about these subjects. I think I started doing a lot more sport, and it became quite important to me to spend more time in nature. I mean, having the time to do it. Like in India, I really didn't have the time to do it, mainly because my work occupied a lot of my life. And then I really didn't make time for it. Find time and make time is a bit of a nuance, but I didn't make time for it. But here I make time for it. Being able to cycle is great. I mean, it's a small thing when I say it out loud, but being able to cycle and having cycling paths and having routes where you can just go cycle is great. So that also brought me a bit closer to nature, let's say. And also, like, the public transport system and the train system here is amazing. So you can basically hop onto a train and like nature is quite accessible to you within an hour or so.
It sounds to me like you're saying that the space that is afforded to you after you moved out of India into Berlin is really the catalyst for a lot of change in you. Would you say that's
Of
true?
course,
Yeah.
of course, yeah. That's a great way to phrase it. I think a lot of people come to Berlin, and I've heard this from a lot of expats. It gives them the time to process what their life has been before, and to a large extent, it allows people to heal a lot. For example, like they say that Berlin doesn't care, again, once again, about who you are and doesn't judge you, but then that also puts you at odds with yourself, because then you finally can face yourself, and then you can finally try to use that silence or solitude to heal. It really does change the way that you look at yourself and other humans, and how you want to live your life and what you want to do with your life, right? Like, we all want to do meaningful things and we want to live meaningful lives, but unless we take the space to figure out what meaning is for us, it's going to be a bit hard.
Yeah, you mentioned this part about being in this kind of like the right city or country. Can you talk a little bit more about that? You and I have been to New York together because we used to work together. Imagine you were living in New York instead of in Berlin right from the get-go. Do you think you would have developed in the same areas? Would you have had that space?
This is a really interesting question, mainly because I feel like the country that you end up in shapes you quite a bit. As a technologist, I'm used to thinking of technology in a very different way when I was in India. In India, it was all about speed. In India, it was all about delivery. In India, it was all about building cool things without guardrails. So here, when I build software, the first thing I think about is data privacy, regulations, and it really does change the way that you think about problems and things, right? Whether you like it or not, after spending a lot of time in a country, you end up passively absorbing a lot of the context and cultural beliefs of the people that surround you. So had I been in New York, for example, I would have thought about things in a completely different way. Having known people from New York, I feel like it really works well for people who are extremely creative. Berlin does too, but Berlin is a bit more laid back, I would say. New York would be a bit more intense. It would really parallel the life that I had in Mumbai. A rich person and a poor person, the divide is quite wide. And being in that sort of an environment where people are like constantly hustling and people are constantly trying to climb the social ladder molds you in a different way. Whereas if you come to a country like Germany or like any of the Nordic countries, for example, it is a more egalitarian approach towards building a society where like one of the goals of society building is to reduce the disparity between the rich and the poor. Whether it works or not is a different story, but at least the foundations upon which the community has been built is slightly different. So I don't know. So if you're someone who's chasing like innovation, for example, and you want to be at the cutting edge of everything, I would wholeheartedly recommend you to go to the US, because you can do that sort of stuff in the US. Maybe compromising the intensity of the pace of innovation for social indicators and like other things, then maybe like Europe is the place for you. So it really does mold you to a large extent.
So you have described yourself in 3 words. Can you now try to describe people of Berlin in 3 words?
Oh God. Berlin. I feel like Berlin is quite free. You can do and think and say and live the way you want without a lot of interruptions. Creative, mainly because people really like to create. And Berlin has depth, mainly because one of the things that I really like about the city is that every turn of the street, every corner, everywhere, there is a lot of history, a lot of scars. It carries through when you don't expect it to carry through. Like when you're walking on a street, why it kind of hits you. The sort of stuff that has happened in the city and the sort of cultural depth that comes along with it, I feel is quite unique and special about the city. I mean, that's really what I really appreciate about the city, because you just walk around the corner and you see like a wall that kept people apart for so long, and it's just weaved into the fabric of society. Being reminded of that past on a regular basis is and can be really powerful. It's very unique about the city in the sense that like the generation that was a part of this oppression is still a generation that you can bump into on a daily basis, right? Like you can just talk to someone who was around when the wall was here, and they would tell you all sorts of stories about how life was back then. It's the most beautiful thing about the city, I believe, is like it's just peppered with new and old everywhere, and that gives the city a very unique flavor that is really hard to find in other cities. I feel like Germany and Berlin in particular does like a really good job of curating their history and not trying to erase it. A lot of the things that some other country would destroy or some other country would try to overwrite, they preserve a lot of it, and they like talking about it. They try to discuss it, and they don't shy away from it.
What do you think your home country, India, does better than Germany?
I feel like India is so awesome because of the fact that India is very warm, very welcoming. I mean, it's not perfect. People don't have a lot of things, but they're more than happy to share them. They're more than happy to make you a part of their families, so to speak. Sometimes quite literally, but it's something that I miss from India, let's say. Food, I feel like Germans, and it's not really their strong suit. I'm not going to mince words here. But that being said, you can find all sorts of like cuisines in Berlin, and the food scene is quite amazing here. But I still do miss food from my home country. I also feel like Indians or like India is, I mean, they're a lot more adaptable. Sometimes it's okay to not be super rigid about things because it does truly hinder innovation. There are trade-offs to everything. I mean, like everything is gray, but I do find that having a culture that is accepting of flaws and still tries to move ahead, and it still tries to innovate with limited constraints, that's something that I feel like Germany could learn. Germany is one of the strongest countries in the EU at this point, but internet access is still horrendous in many places in Germany. And why is that? And why is it taking so long? People can make educated guesses, but I guess those are the sort of things that really do get in the way, like the ease of doing business that gets in the way. For example, like as an entrepreneur, I can attest to the fact that running a business here is not easy because of regulations and because of bureaucracy here. I mean, India is a mixed bag, but in some aspects, India does it quite well. In terms of digitalization, in terms of automation, India does that quite well.
Would you recommend anyone visit Mumbai and maybe even move there?
Moving to Bombay, no, I wouldn't recommend anyone to move to Bombay. So there are areas in Bombay that are like really great to live, and you can really have like a good quality of life there. That being said, Bombay comes with its own share of problems and trade-offs. A lot of people, a lot of pollution, a lot of hustling. You just, I mean, this is always things happening, right? Like you just have to look out of the window and you see something hilarious that would make your day. When I'm in Bombay, most of my creativity comes from chaos, because I'm surrounded by chaos. Things happen to me, there's a lot of stimuli, there's like a lot of people doing a lot of things, and you draw on all of that, and then you use that to power the way that you think about the world. And here in Berlin, it comes from a place of peace or more calm, mainly because the life here affords me to be a bit more deliberate about the way that I create. And one could make the same argument about New York, right? Like New York, a lot of the creativity does come from chaos. It's very similar to Bombay in the sense that there's a lot happening. People should definitely visit Bombay. It just gives you a completely different perspective of life, man. It's just like if you're a European or if you're someone who's never traveled around in Asia, the way that your day starts, the way that you go about things, the way that you get to work, the way that you encounter so many people, the interactions that you have with people, the sort of things that you have to worry about, the sort of things that tire you out, and so on and such, right? Like all of those things are something that people need to experience, mainly because it gives you more empathy for people who come from some other part of the world.
Is there anything that you wish someone had told you before you moved?
I spent a lot of my life in Berlin with one foot here, one foot there in the beginning, because my mindset was, hey, this is temporary, I'm going to move out of the city anyway. And that was my mindset for quite some time, at least like a few years. And I would recommend for people to not think like that. Like when they move to the place, like commit to the city and commit to knowing the city and think as if you're going to spend your whole life there. I would have been happier if someone told me to not half-ass it and not have half of my head somewhere else. And yeah, I feel like that's sound advice. Even if I move now, I would really want to like move and make the move and commit, rather than like thinking of it as a very temporary phase in my life.
When you're swimming out into the ocean, you want to go to an island, but you keep looking back, you're wasting a lot of energy, you're changing your motivation to get to the island and so on, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also like it doesn't allow you to experience the totality of life here. I mean, because your brain always has this like backup plan, at least in the beginning, at least for a few months, like try committing to the whole experience of like being in a new place and being a part of life there. Sure, you can move back if it doesn't feel right, and if you can go somewhere else if it doesn't feel right. But while you're there, you're there.
Is there anything else you would want to share to an audience of people who are potentially thinking of moving abroad for the first time?
Yeah, I would ask them to be more patient, to be kinder to themselves, and not admonish themselves for not making a decision or being hesitant or having cold feet or not knowing or not being sure. That's all a part of the journey. I guess it's important to realize, like, wherever you are still with you. If you know what I mean, like, the person that you are is still with you, and if you're at peace with that part of yourself, then being in a place becomes a bit easier.
Is there anything you want people to know, like where to find you, your work?
You can find my company at WBP, that's We Build Products, WBP.dev. If you want to find out a bit more about me, then you can go to my website, which is kiyangar.net. Also, you can find my podcast. It's called Techno Spiritual Crossings, and you can find that on Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. And it basically talks about the intersection of technology and spirituality and how we make meaning in the world in this age.
All are topics that we touched upon briefly in this conversation.
Yes.
So if you want an extension of that, I think it makes sense for people to go find you there.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks for inviting me.
It was really fun, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.